Then let's look at the anti-racism movement. Okay, what is that? It's quite a vague term. So it might be better to say movements, okay, instead of one movement. So you had a really early movement, the abolitionist movement, which you could say was anti-racist because they wanted to abolish slavery, which was largely justified by racism. And there are some famous names there of abolitionists. Then you could say that an anti-racism movement was decolonization. So when countries who were controlled by white European powers said, no, we can govern ourselves, and we have the right to do that, and we have the power to do that. But they weren't necessarily anti-racism. They were pro-independence often, or anti-colonialism. The civil rights movement was almost definitely anti-racism because it was explicitly against segregation, so separation and differential treatment of Black people in America. So that could be the anti-racism movement really starting. Or it could be the Black Power movement, which was slightly different thing that happened a little bit later. Or it could be much more recent. It could be Black Lives Matter. So in the 2010s, in the last 10 years, basically. And if I'm honest with you, it's not entirely clear what the examiner who came up with this thinks it is. And I think they're giving you a bit of freedom to define it how you like. It's possible that they probably, mostly in their head, they're thinking of the civil rights movement, but they could be thinking of Black Lives Matter, or they could be thinking of a mixture of all of these. So it's up to you to tell them which one you're talking about. Then reduce. So how do you reduce anything? How do you reduce racism? Is it meaningfully reducing, right? Meaningfully, or is it just reducing from, let's say, if I had the volume at 1,000 and I reduced it to 999, technically I've reduced it, but that's still very, very loud, right? If they're on a scale. So does it mean meaningfully reduce? Does it reduce a lot? We're talking about quantity now, but maybe it's reducing quality because there's different types of racism. So maybe racism has reduced in terms of badness or harm, i.e. racism, we no longer, hopefully, in some parts of the world we do, but we don't so much have, putting people of certain skin colors on boats and selling them into slavery, but we might have other types of racism that are equally bad, even though the types of racism might have reduced, for instance. So, or maybe it's reduced in quantity. Sorry, maybe it hasn't reduced in quantity. There's still loads of racism, but the racism, the individual instances aren't as bad. They're not as violent. So be specific if you're arguing that it's reduced or it hasn't reduced. Be specific about saying in what ways has it reduced. Okay. And then the other problem is about causing, because let's say the anti-racism movement starts here and it wants to reduce racism. And then 10 years later, racism has reduced. We don't know for a fact that the anti-racism movement caused that. There could have been other things that caused that. Could have been a politician or an economic change or a certain war somewhere or differences in population, lots of old racist people dying or something. There's loads of reasons why a reduction in racism might happen that don't have anything to do with the movement. So you've got to also be careful to say, if it's not as simple as going, well, the anti-racism movement started in 1960 and racism is now not as bad, therefore the anti-racism movement reduced racism. Maybe, but maybe not. Okay, so you need to actually link the movement to the things that it has actually changed or actually reduced. That's really important.